welcome to this second video about Obsidian, root locus, cadence and muzzle, where I do cool and interesting patches with an explanation. If you haven't checked out the first video in this two-part series, well, I put a link in the description. In that video I made 4 patches, so I'll continue the count in this video from there. Let's have a closer look at what makes this patch interesting, at least in my opinion, in cool, interesting patch with explanation number 5. So what's happening here is I'm running an output of weather drones into the input of rings. I'm using one of the outputs through a low pass filter. The output of that low pass filter, well, I first want to say this is my voice. This is the sound that I want to start processing. So let's actually listen to that sound before doing more processing. If we open up the filter, we of course reintroduce some of those higher harmonics that Rings is creating for us. I want to add some movement to this and a reverb to make it more spatial. To add the movement, a notch filter like there is on Root Locus is really helpful. Let's patch our voice through Root Locus. I'm just going to use one of its inputs and then let's monitor the notch output. The notch filter, well, creates a notch wherever the frequency knob is positioned. And I've noticed you can hear less and less of the effect when you crank up the resonance. This is, well, entirely opposite to how we usually use a filter. But with the Q factor here, the resonance completely at 0, you will hear what's going on when I start tweaking the frequency knob. And I'm really going for a subtle effect here. So let's listen again. You should be able to hear some slight variation to the sound there. I can modulate this with an output of Obsidian. If I get the cables out of the way, you should be able to see the rate that the LFO is going there. Let's increase the resonance. You'll hear that the effect, well, is, I would say, barely noticeable, but I don't think it's noticeable at all at this point. So let's turn this down. And then when we send this through a stereo reverb, I really feel this adds to the patch. And keep in mind, the only thing that's really moving here is Root Locus. Everything else is static, really. Still, there is some subtle movement going on, which I really like. And it's something that's really easy when you have a notch filter. Let's now have a listen at cool, interesting patch with explanation number 6. For this patch we'll have a look at root locus and we'll try to get it to self-oscillate. We're listening to something that's not going through any of the Nekyia Circuits modules. It's just 2 VCOs going into dual filter. The first stage here is a high-pass filter. I've chained this through to the second part of dual filter, which is currently set up as a low-pass filter, and this is going from the output straight into the mixer. We'll do something with this in a minute. But now let's first look at root locus. Currently it's set at audio rate, and when I crank up the resonance, there is nothing happening. You should be able to see any self-oscillation on the scope since I have the low-pass output connected to the first trace or the first input here on the scope. To get root locus to self-oscillate, we need to patch the bandpass output or the bandpass. I keep saying this wrong. So you need to connect the bandpass output back to the input of the filter. And then you can see on the scope that we have something going on there. If I slow this down quite a lot, you can see we have a nice sine wave there. You can play around with the gain setting on root locus. This will make the output more and more squarey. This will also affect the rate of oscillation. If you turn this down completely, it's possible that we will lose the oscillation altogether. So it's best to keep it, well, somewhere around here is what I found to work best. The reason I used a stackable cable here is because I want to have a look at the bandpass output itself as well in relation to the low pass output. You can see how we get like quadrature behavior here. The bandpass output is phase shifted in relation to the low pass output. We have a nice sine wave output from the high pass output as well. This seems to be inverted signal from the low pass output. The notch output though doesn't really give us a lot of sine wave. So let's stick to using the low pass output, which is the top trace, and the bandpass output, which is the lower trace there. Now I want to switch to sub audio rates. You can see that we lost our oscillation there. Sometimes you need to play around with the gain settings for a moment until the filter starts self-oscillating again. Let's crank up the frequency a bit because it was really low. And then once it starts going, you can back off the gain again. You could also back off the resonance setting, but I like to use the gain for this. And again, at this point we have nice sine wave LFOs. Now I want to use these outputs to modulate the filter, filtering our audio waves here. So the first trace here I'll connect to the CV input of the high pass filter here. And then the second output, the second trace, I'll connect to the low pass side of dual filter. you can hear that this gives us a really nice modulation that's really different than what it would be if we connected the same signal to both filters. In fact, I can do this like so. So this is the same modulation for both these filters. And now the phase shifted sine waves. And this is what meant with quadrature behavior. There's like phase shifted versions of the same LFO going on. The saturation is probably happening in dual filter, as there is quite some grit possible with this filter. And since I have the resonances on them cranked as well, it is to be expected that we have some rather nice clipping, but it's clipping nonetheless. And of course you can go faster if you want. Let's go into audio rates. Oh, that was nice. Let's do that again without talking. Let's switch root locus to audio rates. Let's now have a look at a cool, interesting patch with explanation number 7. I can't possibly do a video about these modules and not mention like this multimode sweepable output of root locus. Let's actually use this output here. And now we should be able to morph between low pass, band pass and high pass. If we increase the gain, you can hear that this fattens up the sound quite a bit. And this becomes even more interesting when we turn up the resonance to about halfway. We can also play around with the filter frequency. This is another surprise. But well, I want to modulate all 3 of these parameters. let's modulate the filter morphing first. I'm just using a triangle output of Obsidian. Let's modulate the filter frequency as well. And let's also modulate the resonance amount. For this I'm using the difference output, which is going through the top trace on the scope here. Now if I reintroduce the reverb, and actually it's not a reverb, it's a delay. Let's bring in a second sound coming from rings. Down a little bit. I think that's really nice. Let's now have a look at cool and interesting patch with explanation number 8. I mentioned this in the previous video, but I really like how root locus sounds when you ping it. Right now I'm using the square output of weather drones to ping the filter. There's a dedicated ping input. By the way, you can use a regular input for pinging as well. But sometimes with these ping circuits there's some clever circuitry going on which make so that it, well, behaves a little bit more predictable. So let's use the ping input. You can see that the resonance is about 3/4 open. We can go a little bit further. This just makes the tail longer. We can go shorter as well. And this is something where root locus is different from, well, a lot of filters that I have tried. Even when you really turn down the resonance, it still sounds really nice to ping it. It's not clicky, or some filters can sound a little bit glitchy when you ping them without turning up the resonance. We can send fault proactive information into root locus. Let's turn up the resonance so we can hear more of the notes. Let's increase the rate of the pinging. Yeah, I really like how this sounds. And actually, let's send it through some delay. I really think this sounds really cool. I already set this a few times. There's something clever that you can do, for example, by sending the high-pass output back into the input. Let's kill the reverb, or the delay, I should say. So with this knob turned to the right, we're not getting any of the high-pass output into the signal, but when I turn this to the left, we slowly introduce it. And of course we can modulate this by modulating the movement of this knob. Really interesting indeed. We can also send some feedback into the frequency CV input, which can result in this kind of weird behavior. And if we, for example, modulate the amount of resonance, I'm sure this will turn out great. Maybe I can send the bandpass into the input and modulate that parameter like a minute ago. Oh, that's the wrong input. Well, once we remove the feedback to the frequency, it should still be in tune, because the volt octave input on Root Locus is really rather precise. I've had it play melodies together with other modules I have, and well, it didn't go out of tune, not that I noticed. Let's reintroduce the delay. Let's slow down the clock here. Anyway, this is going to be it for this video. I thought doing 4 more patches would cover some of the things that I still wanted to mention, or, well, that I kind of forgot. Once again, I want to thank the people at Nekyia Circuits for sending me these 4 nice modules. The build quality on these is great, by the way. The knobs feel really sturdy. There's no wobble at all. In fact, I'm moving. I should fasten this screw, but I'm moving my whole desk here, so yeah, it just feels okay. I don't think you should run a tank over them, but anything else than that, you should be okay. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something about these modules, or just in general about synthesizer techniques. See you next time. Bye.